A woman futurist in the 1930s would be really cool. Apparently she'd be too cool to live. The City on the Edge of Forever is one of the best regarded episodes of the original series. It's a time travel episode that follows Kirk and Spock into the past, back to America in the middle of the Great Depression. They need to bring a drug-addled Dr. McCoy back to the 23rd century before he can change history for the worse, eliminating Starfleet and the life they all know. The episode also features a woman. Women and feminism is a sticking point for the original Star Trek series, and kind of for the entire franchise, but that's a bigger can of worms I don't really intend to get into right now. For all of their flawed but well-intentioned efforts to portray a post-racial human society and to generally critique racial prejudice, they don't really address women's rights or sexism in any meaningful way, along with a lot of other social issues. There are throwaway lines here and there that imply some liberated thinking, and women on the crew are never doubted or questioned. They are assumed to be entirely competent and integral to the operation of the ship. A good start. But, they're also wearing miniskirts, which is complicated. The miniskirt is a really good focal point for how women are treated in Star Trek, as liberated sex objects. The miniskirt was a symbol of independence and forward motion stylistically. It gave women a particular freedom of movement and was largely associated with the women's rights movement of the time. It's also quite revealing, and as much as we might like to live in a reality where revealing clothes aren't regarded as inherently sexual, we totally do, and in this same way, the women of Star Trek are practical, generally represented as quite competent, but also appeal to the male gaze and patriarchal sensibilities. There are two academic articles that I think really help frame these characters. The first is Laura Mulvey's Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema. This is where the term the male gaze was coined academically. There's a lot going on in this article, and it's a little presumptive and psychoanalytical for my taste in places, but the general ideas are really important and really relevant to talking about these characters. The core idea of the male gaze is that men have the power in Hollywood, and when you are watching something that is made by men, usually straight, white, and likely rich men, you will be put in their position. The camera becomes the eye of the man, and as such sees women as patriarchy sees them, objects. This can be seen in costuming that caters to straight male tastes, in camera angles that place women up above the camera as if on a pedestal or lower than the camera and the men around her looked down upon. It's most seen in narratives that prioritize male characters as the agents of the story and women as their props and motivations. It is a reminder that the vision of the world presented on screen reflects the perspective of the person behind the camera. When you watch their film, in some ways, you see the world through their eyes. Now, I'm a big fan of the idea that you can read any piece of media any way you like, but at the same time, you can't really deny that the creator created it. Even if you can read different meanings or even opposing meanings into a work, the creator still made certain decisions, and when a man decides that a woman will be sexy or that she will fall for a particular man or that she must die, we can't ignore the ghosts of patriarchal norms and of the long, long history of commodified and undervalued women. So with that primer on how patriarchy impacts how women are portrayed on film, let's talk about the work of Dr. Karen Blair. After the release of Star Trek the Motion Picture, Dr. Blair put out an article titled Sex and Star Trek. Half of this article breaks down the women portrayed in the original series. Who are they? How were they portrayed? Are there patterns? It turns out the patterns are pretty stark. Blair outlined 3 qualities common to women in the original series, and argued that every woman on the show featured at least one of these qualities. Number 1, she is portrayed as a sex object, or, to put it more mildly, as a love interest. 2, She is highly attached to a male character of equal or greater plot relevance, usually a father, a brother, or a partner, think husband or boyfriend. 3, she disappears at the end of the episode, usually by death or by being left behind, never to be seen or heard of again. And most women in Star Trek feature all of these qualities. The notion of women as sex objects in the show is also particularly damning in light of Mulvey's theory of the male gaze. Their presentation is crafted almost exclusively by men for a presumed male audience. But sometimes DC Fontana was in the writer's room, and the women actually have some kind of character. In spite of these 3 constants that Blair posited, the women of Star Trek regularly have some implication of a complex inner life, an individuality that is not always granted to female side characters in men's stories. And so we end up with an interesting tension between agent and object. These women, were they real, would honestly be pretty cool. I'd hang out with most of them, or watch an episode that centered them as a protagonist. But they aren't real people, and they aren't protagonists. As far as the story and the filmmaking is concerned, they are objects. They are props in men's stories meant to propel the narrative forward. Like Vina in the pilot, any feminist readings of these women are undermined by, or at the very least must acknowledge, the reductive framework of this men's fantasy of the late 60s. I could talk about any of these women at length, but let's take one example and really break it down. How about the woman at the heart of one of the best regarded episodes? Edith Keeler is, in many ways, the quintessential Star Trek woman. On paper, she's terribly cool. She's professional, she's independent, and of course, she's charming. But none of that can save her from her unfortunate fate. She is only a prop in a story about men.
Imagine, for a moment, a story about a woman powering through the Great Depression, supporting those in her community, dreaming of a better future where mankind sees the stars and finds peace as a nation and as a planet. It's a beautiful idea. Imagine if she had agency in a Star Trek episode, learning from Kirk and Spock and using these positive qualities of hers to, help thwart an alien invasion, or just help find Bones like the original episode. They could help her take a step or 2 outside of her status, share with her some of the future's secrets. Bones' crazed adventure through time could set off some butterfly effect that Miss Keeler's skills are best suited to prevent. She could lay some of Starfleet's earliest groundwork even, unknown or undervalued in her own time, but maybe rediscovered and known to the well-studied Captain Kirk. Hell, if we keep our standards low, she could do all that and still be utterly smitten with Kirk, but he must give her up because she does her work with her husband, a man from her own time who understands her.
The change in surname could keep her relevance a secret, still letting Spock have that big reveal moment of, no, Jim, you can't love her because reasons. But that isn't what happens. Not by a long shot.
This is a story about Edith Keeler the same way The Lord of the Rings is about the ring. Sure, she's a person. She has thoughts, feelings, ideas. She really does believe in that far-flung future of peace and space exploration. And that's really cool. But all she does is exist. She lives her life as if nothing were happening, short of some chaste flirting with the dashing Kirk and attempting to nurse a flipped-out Leonard McCoy back to health. No, her real import to the story is that she's just so darn easy to fall in love with. Her brilliant futurism and kindness has both Kirk and McCoy absolutely smitten, which leaves Mr. Spock to deliver the bad news. Edith Keeler must die.
Yeah, so turns out if Edith Keeler doesn't get hit by a car and die an untimely death, she's too awesome and convinces the US to just generally adopt more peaceful policies, which apparently means there's no one left to defeat Hitler in Germany, and so everything goes to shit. Apparently we can't have nice things. Edith Keeler being too cool to live is a good example of how Star Trek drops the ball when it comes to representing women.
The writers dangle a compelling woman before the viewer, but she is an accessory to the story. She is a shiny bauble to motivate or distract or confound the men that the story is really about. Or, according to urban legend, to distract the censors from the heavier political messages in some episodes. The men get to do things that have real impact and have conflicts that we follow in detail and return next week to have another adventure, maybe with another woman to push them forward in the same ways. No matter how cool a woman in Star Trek is, it is only for the benefit of the men around her. Her story means nothing. All that matters is how she affects men.
All the feminine archetypes in The Cage posed a question. How will women be presented in the series going forward? Will it be better? Will it be worse? I would argue it was neither.
The same way Venus' struggle and Number One's agency are undermined by the patriarchy that crafted their characters and stories, all the women of Star Trek have patriarchal fingerprints all over them. The tension suggested by Venus' story is made clear throughout the 3 seasons. Women are people, sure, but they're still objects in men's stories, just as surely as they must be beautiful to live among us.
The original series makes clear a common failing when it comes to writing women for mass media. It doesn't matter how much of a strong, independent woman she is on paper, if she doesn't have agency and a place in the story that is more than just she's here and she's pretty. Come back and talk to me when she's central to the story because of her unique thoughts, experiences, and skills, and not just because she's important to some plot-relevant man. I hope you enjoyed this video. It was great fun to make, and I was not kidding when I said that I could talk about all of the women in the original series at length. So if you want me to do a video like this on another one, let me know in the comments. I would love to. But even if you don't have a suggestion like that, a like, a comment, subscribe, share the video with your friends, that'd be awesome. It would all be really appreciated. Thanks. Have a good one.